Kicking off the list at number 10. Black hole secrets. This one I'm extremely excited for, and you should be as well. Only a couple of weeks ago, NASA launched a mission to measure X-rays released by black holes and neutron stars. Sounds pretty scientific and nerdy. X-rays are extremely powerful, but we can only do so much with Earth's atmosphere standing in the way. That's where science comes in. We'll just blast an X-ray out of there. Boom, problem solved. 190 million, debit, bop. It'll go on a 2-year mission, seeing the universe in ways that we never have before. We'll finally see what's going on with these high energy events, like stars exploding or the birth of black holes, rapid rotations, extreme temperatures. Everything in these X-rays will tip us off to their origin, which is vital when it comes to something like a black hole, something we already know nothing about. Polarized light only vibrates in one direction, whereas light, our light, vibrates in any direction. We're narrowing this cosmic puzzle down one piece at a time, and it's pretty exciting, but like I said, definitely terrifying. Number 9. Voyager 1. We've looked at Saturn in awe more so than the other planets because of its rings. Maybe it's the 2008 Beyonce classic Single Ladies, but we love rings, still to this day. Since 1610 we've known about Saturns, and it stood out ever since Galileo brought this headline to town. Its many moons get hit by many meteors, and the dust and ice that follows orbits the giant. But it wasn't until 1979 until we discovered that Jupiter also has rings. Small, but mighty. That discovery came after the Voyager 1 passed Jupiter, but it also discovered 2 new Jovian moons. So far this flyby is treating us quite well, but it only gets better. Only gets better. Once Voyager 1 got to Saturn, it found 5 new moons and an entirely new ring called the G-ring. As of 2012, Voyager 1 has been in interstellar space, so only time will tell what's really out there. I'm terrified. Are we in a simulation? Probably. Number 8. The new telescope. Since we launched the Hubble telescope back in April 1990, it's been a key asset in these groundbreaking discoveries. We've been able to predict the age of the universe, roughly, and we found moons around Pluto. Since the mission began back in 1990, Hubble has made over 1 million observations. It can literally see our past, as it shows us things 13 billion light years away. That's why this new telescope launching later this month can literally rewrite history. This is the most expensive space instrument to ever be flown or launched away from us. It's 100 times more powerful than Hubble, which is insane after you really think about what we've done with it. The James Webb telescope will let us see back to the creation of the universe, so keep your notifications on for a bit, because we might be in a simulation after all. We actually don't know. What do you think's out there? Just more space, more planets? Are we inside of a body like Osmosis Jones? I have no idea. I literally don't know. Number 7. The ISS. Ah yes, that time humans launched a science center into space. We love it. We still see it. I see it once a night. It's beautiful. Are astronauts still there? Do we use it? Yes and yes. We actually just grew peppers up there for the first time ever. There's lots happening. Back in 1998, the United States and Russia launched the first 2 pieces to the International Space Station, the ISS. Pieces were added over time more and more until come November 2000, it was now complete. In 2018, legislation was also approved to extend operations until 2030. So every time you see a bright ball of light slowly pass over your head, it might be a bunch of scientists eating space tacos. Literally, it's probably that. Number 6. Explorer 1. Long before NASA was even NASA, in fact, back in the Jet Propulsion Laboratory days, tests were underway to follow the recent Sputnik satellite into the cosmos. Where are the Russians going? I don't know, but we're gonna follow them. Cut to a few months later, Explorer 1 was ready for its first day at space school. NASA's first mission was to study the cosmic rays in Earth's orbit. Pretty low key compared to what we're doing now. I mean, Elon Musk just launched a car out there because he's like, I'm bored. The cosmic ray activity was actually so much lower than anticipated. So much so that scientists actually sent out another satellite 2 months later. Physicist James Van Allen believed that there was something interfering with the satellite cosmic ray detector, so once the second satellite was in the picture, literally, that theory was backed up. And this introduced us to the Van Allen radiation belts. Imagine getting radiation belts named after you, that'd be awesome. Just Taylor radiation. It's not as cool. Number 5. The space shuttle. Kinda hard to walk on the moon without getting a ride there first, am I right? In 1972, the Apollo program started to slow down, and the bills were starting to come in. These Apollo rockets were of course single use, but they were expensive. We're literally just throwing money into the universe. New reusable spacecraft was underway. Richard Nixon announced this new spacecraft, just literally 2 rocket boosters attached to an orbiter module with an external fuel tank, and it took them 9 years to figure it out, and come 1981, the shuttle Columbia lifted off. Our first reusable space shuttle, that was soon followed by 4 others: Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour. Many of these combined 135 missions included a pit stop or 2 at the International Space Station. It all comes together. Number 4. Apollo 13. April 11th, 1970, Apollo 13 was heading for the moon. On board the ship was astronauts James Lovell, John Swigert, and Fred Hayes. 46 hours after takeoff, there was an explosion that damaged the shuttle drastically. Every system to keep the astronauts alive and well were no longer operational. The second oxygen tank thermostat had been damaged long before the launch, and since its blast-off, these astronauts had little to no chance of coming home. There's actually a movie about this entire thing, and it's a wild ride. You have to watch it. A Tom Hanks classic. Their power supply, their water, their oxygen, heat, light, everything was just cut off. They had lost over 30 pounds combined as a unit when they got back. It was horrible. The people at NASA's Mission Control Center, they had to do months worth of calculations in only a few days. Instead of going to the moon, they had to figure out a way to use its pull and then just return these guys as quickly and as safely as possible back to Earth. Number 3. Perseverance. Only 140 million miles away, Mars is pretty similar to Earth. Only its days last 37 minutes longer, and they're definitely a little colder than ours here. Maybe not in Canada, I don't know, it's a cold one today. It's home to not one, but 2 moons, and its atmosphere is primarily CO2 with some nitrogen, carbon, phosphorus, and oxygen. 2020 will go down, of course, as one of the worst years in all of our lives, but off-planet, over on Mars, it was a little more hopeful. The Mars 2020 mission was launched on July 30th, and finally, this past February, it landed. The team sent this rover up, Perseverance, which was a cosmic Trojan horse essentially. It was loaded. This thing had an ultralight spectrometer, panoramic cameras, subsurface radars, weather station, and perhaps the most interesting, it had a helicopter, a little drone. Lovely. Like a little Decepticon, just released a and it flew away. Ingenuity hitched a ride, and come April 19th, 2021, we have our first flight on Mars. Look at it go. It's so small. A little bit different than when the Wright brothers had to, run their way into the skies. Now we're here. Number 2, dead galaxies. The universe is about 13 billion years old, and new research from NASA using the Hubble Space Telescope along with the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array in northern Chile, they both combined their powers and they found 6 different dead galaxies. Yeah, galaxies that had run out of the cold hydrogen needed to make these stars, and without the fuel for stars, these galaxies were basically running on nothing. Which is interesting if you're a scientist, and also if you're not one, because already you're like, what? These things can die? This discovery led us to a new question that we didn't even know we had. What led these galaxies to die? What happened to all the cold gas in them so early on? These 6 galaxies lived fast, hot lives, but we aren't really sure what went wrong. Lead author and assistant professor at astronomy of University of Massachusetts, Kate Whitaker, she proposed several potential explanations and gives us insight into the future of the studies when she says, did a massive super black hole in the galaxy's center turn on and heat up all the gas? If so, the gas could still be there, but now it's hot. Or could it have been expelled and now it's being prevented from going back onto the galaxy? Or did the galaxy just use up all this power and now the supply is just cut off? These are some of the crazy questions that people are asking. Meanwhile, I'm like, where's my phone charger? I haven't seen it in 30 minutes. And finally, number 1, solar flares. We literally revolve around our sun and its heat. It blesses us with life energy, solar rotation, and most importantly, some sweet tan lines. But sometimes she acts up and gets a little scary, to say the least. Sometimes the sun creates these powerful magnetic fields that create sunspots larger than our entire planet. Yeah, I can't even think of that right now. I can't even fathom. This creates a stream of radiation. It creates solar wind. Now, normally this is a beautiful event. The northern lights happen because of Earth's magnetic field reacting to this radiation. But too much of a good thing can be just disaster. Back in October, a large solar flare was spotted, and then 3 days later, it finally hit Earth. The geomagnetic storm reached category G2, which out of 5 is still pretty strong. The biggest solar event was back in 1859. It's called the Carrington event. It was strong enough to disrupt telegraph communications, even shocking some telegraph operators. Imagine that. Imagine calling your friend and the power goes out and you get zapped through your phone. We were looking at power outages on a massive scale. If this happened now, people would lose their shit. Right in the middle of Spider-Man No Way Home, bam, blackout. Life as we know it is now meaningless. Is the Green Goblin back? I don't know, we couldn't tell you.
Number 10. Low gravity doesn't affect your bones and muscles. We know that humans do just fine in Earth's gravity. On the other hand, we know that human bones and muscles can atrophy terribly in zero gravity, as seen in experiments on the International Space Station. Astronauts on the ISS have to exercise for 2 hours a day to prevent muscle loss, but their bones still lose calcium over time and they don't recover until they come back to Earth. Adding to this, we don't know how the human body will react on Mars, where gravity is only about 0.38 the strength of Earth. Many people have long assumed that humans can survive just fine in Martian gravity. It'll be just like Earth, only we can jump a little higher, but we don't actually know this for a fact. It might turn out out that low Martian gravity is just as bad for human health as zero gravity. Mars's low gravity may also erode other capabilities that are crucial for everyday functioning. For instance, NASA has found that eyesight can mysteriously deteriorate in zero gravity. Astronaut John Phillips went from a perfect 20/20 to 2100 after just 6 months aboard the ISS. Astronauts also find it harder to sleep in zero gravity, and many passengers in space suffer from insomnia. Number 9. Space Shuttle Challenger astronauts died instantly. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart 73 seconds into its flight and ended the lives of all 7 crew members instantly. The spacecraft disintegrated 46,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Cape Canaveral, Florida at 11:39 a.m. It was the first fatal accident involving an American spacecraft in flight. It was thought that all the astronauts passed away instantly, but it was revealed decades later that some, if not all of the astronauts survived the initial explosion, as the cockpit cabin had enough protection to not be breached. For 2 minutes and 45 seconds, they were awake and aware as they plummeted towards the Atlantic Ocean, which is terrifying. Understandably, NASA knew that the news of their terrifying death would have crippled the space program even more than it already was, so they kept this a secret. I'm gonna be honest, I do understand the reasoning for this, but it's just sad. Number 8. The sun is a big ball of fire. Okay, so this isn't all NASA's fault, but despite what you've been led to believe, the sun is not a ball of fire. There isn't any fire in the sun. Fire requires oxygen, and the sun is composed mostly of helium and hydrogen. In fact, the heat from the sun comes from something called nuclear fusion. The pressure and temperature in the sun's core causes the hydrogen atoms to fuse together into helium atoms. This process gives off the intense heat and light of the sun. People, including scientists, sometimes say that the sun burns hydrogen to make it glow, but that is just a figure of speech. Hydrogen really doesn't burn, it fuses into helium. Also, the sun itself is white, which means it contains all the colors in the visible spectrum. The sun appears orangish yellow because of the blue light it emits has a shorter wavelength and is scattered in the atmosphere, which is the same process that makes the sky appear blue. Number 7. Mars is the only other habitable planet. It's been said that Mars is the only other habitable planet, but that's not true. Kepler 186f is the first rocky exoplanet to be found within the habitable zone, as the region around the host star has the temperature that is right for liquid water. This planet is also very close in size to Earth. While planets have previously been found in the habitable zone, they are at least 40% larger in size than Earth, and understanding their makeup is challenging. Kepler 186f is more reminiscent of Earth. Although the size of Kepler 186f is known, its mass and composition are not. Previous research, however, suggests that a planet the size of Kepler 186f is likely to be rocky. Even though we may not find out about what's going on at the surface of this planet anytime soon, it's a strong reminder of why new technologies are being developed that will enable scientists to get a closer look at distant worlds, but we still have a lot to learn. So maybe one day the human race will be living on Kepler 186f. Number 6. Your rocket won't blow up before leaving Earth. Yeah, your rocket can actually explode before you even leave Earth. For example, Elon Musk's plan to go to Mars involves strapping a giant spaceship atop the biggest rocket that humanity has ever built. Because any rocket launch basically involves a long, controlled explosion, no matter how many safety tests are done beforehand, there is always a risk. If anything goes wrong, if the explosion gets out of control, the people strapped in that big container of fuel don't stand a chance. For context, NASA's Space Shuttle program carried 833 passengers between 1981 and 2011. Of those, 14 people died in explosions and 2 high-profile accidents, a fatality rate of 1.6%. That's more dangerous than driving, and it's even a bit riskier than climbing Mount Everest. Some of SpaceX's smaller Falcon 9 rockets have either exploded on the launch pad or blown up mid-flight as well, so safe to say getting to space is just as dangerous as as being there. Number 5. Extended space travel doesn't affect DNA. It's not true. Astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent a year at the International Space Station in 2016, returned to find out that he was 2 inches taller than his departing height. The new physical differences between Scott and his identical twin brother, Mike, also an astronaut, were startling. Scientists compared the DNA of the two and found that besides growing 2 inches, Scott's gut bacteria were completely different and his gene expression had changed. Scientists concluded that the changes were caused by the stresses of space travel, which can cause changes in a cell's biological pathways. Although Scott eventually returned to his original height, his other genetic changes are seemingly irreversible, meaning Scott and his brother are no longer identical twins, which is insane. Number 4. You can only see the Great Wall of China from space. It's been said that the only man-made structure you can see from space is the Great Wall of China, but the visible wall theory was shaken after China's own astronaut, Yang Lui, said he couldn't see the historic structure. There was even talk about rewriting textbooks that supported the theory, a formidable task in Earth's most populous nation. The issue surfaced again after photos taken by Leroy Chiao from the International Space Station were determined to show small sections of the wall in Inner Mongolia about 200 miles north of Beijing. A photo was taken of it, but it wasn't the only thing seen. For years it's been said that the Great Wall of China is the only structure to be seen from space, but that isn't true. From the ISS about 250 miles up, you can see the Great Wall along with numerous other man-made structures, but it's definitely not the most visible imprint of man on our planet. Number 3. Space isn't dangerous. We all know that accidents happen and things can go wrong, but it seems like NASA never told their astronauts how bad things could get. Astronaut Scott Perinsky had to install a new module on the ISS that would serve as a node for the addition of future research laboratories. Part of the mission required changing the location of an array of solar panels. Things were going along really well until the crew inside commanded these large solar panels to extend. They got jammed up and the panels began to tear. It was unsafe to continue to extend this panel any further, and you couldn't retract it either. There was concern that if the astronauts even tried to undock the space shuttle, it might rip apart and hit the shuttle. After 72 hours of grueling work on the ground, NASA came up with a plan. Scott would have to travel further away from safety of an airlock than had ever been previously attempted. It wasn't only the distance that was nerve-wracking, as Scott explained, there was a real danger that we could do even worse damage to the space station. Then there was the potential risk to myself, because if there was any metal-to-metal connection with the solar panel or arcing, it could actually electrocute me or cause ignition in the 100% oxygen in my suit. All the tools I was working with had to be specially insulated. The metal parts of my spacesuit had to be wrapped in special tape, he said. Thankfully, everything worked out and the mission was a success. Scott has said, "I still to this day think it's one of NASA's greatest accomplishments, but it's crazy that he had to go through that." Number 2. There's no life on the moon. When astronaut Neil Armstrong took a walk on the moon and became the first man to do so in 1969, many conspiracy theories came to light. For one, people claimed he didn't actually go to the moon and that the footage was recorded in a studio. Of the many conspiracy theories surrounding this moment, there's one that remains a mystery to date. During the Apollo 11 mission, after Neil landed on the moon, NASA claims to have lost transmission for roughly 2 minutes. And in a reportedly secret message to NASA, Neil said, "These babies were huge, sir. Enormous. Oh god, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecrafts out here lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon watching us." Yep. Seems like Neil encountered some aliens, and I'm sure they never prepared him for that. And coming in at number 1 is the effect space has on you emotionally. Being in space is scary. Your safety is at risk both physically and emotionally. Astronaut Chris Hadfield said sometimes we hear pings as tiny rocks hit our spaceship, and also the creaks and snaps of expanding metal as we go in and out of sunlight. The solar panels are full with tiny holes from the micrometeorites. I watched a large meteorite burn up between me and Australia, and to think that the hypersonic dumb lump of rock randomly hurtling into us instead sent a shiver up my back. Besides that, going to space can cause a lot of psychological issues like anxiety or depression. When actor William Shatner went up to space, he said this of his experience. Everything I had thought was wrong. Everything I had expected to see was wrong. I had thought that going into space would be the ultimate catharsis of that connection I had been looking for between all living things, that being up there would be the next beautiful step to understanding the harmony of the universe. I discovered that the beauty isn't out there, it's down here with all of us. Leaving that behind made my connection to our tiny planet even more profound. It was among the strongest feelings of grief I have ever encountered. The contrast between the vicious coldness of space and the warm nurturing of Earth below me filled with overwhelming sadness. I learned later that I was not alone in this feeling. It is called the overview effect and is not uncommon among astronauts, including Yuri Gagarin, Michael Collins, Sally Ride, and many others. Essentially, when someone travels to space and views Earth from orbit, a sense of the planet's fragility takes hold. I cannot imagine the feelings of experiencing this, and it honestly sounds traumatizing.
Number 10. Alien doorway. So obviously we know that no people have actually landed on Mars and had a look around, at least that we know of. So the majority of this list is from things seen on Mars rover photos, and some of them aren't actually scary and are more like just hilarious or conspiratorial, but give me a break, I've had a long day. Okay. The first image on this list comes from May of this year from the Curiosity rover. The image appears to show an entrance hidden into the side of some Martian rocks. Many people started theorizing that this could have been some sort of door to a hidden alien building underground. The perfect shaping of the hole led many people to believe that it must be something man-made or even alien-made. The naysayers decided that it was caused by a rock breaking off due to an earthquake, but what kind of rock would break off and just leave like a perfect hole like that? So I'm gonna go with aliens. Number 9. The hole. Speaking of holes, in 2017 the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter took a picture that revealed a massive unexplained hole on the surface of the red planet. The orbiter has been going around the planet for the past 16 years and sends photos of the planet back for NASA to analyze, and this one definitely caught them off guard. Mars is covered in various different holes and indentations, but this massive pit really stood out against the rest of the planet's landscape. In real size, the hole is hundreds of meters in diameter and appears to have ice at the bottom of it. The surrounding ground apparently covered in patches of frozen carbon dioxide. NASA really had no explanation for how this hole occurred, and they put a team together to try and work out what might have caused it. But don't worry NASA, you don't need a team, because I am a self-titled extraterrestrial professional, and I say that it's a pool that aliens use for alien Olympic swimming competitions. Number 8. Morse code. This same orbiter sent back another interesting picture of the surface the year before in 2016. This time the surface seemed to be trying to send us a message. The marks on the ground appeared to form dashes and dots which formed into a Morse code message. The long markings in the soil were on the inside of an impact crater in an area known as the Hagel Dune Field. Many people started theorizing that this could potentially be a massive sign that aliens live on Mars and are trying to communicate by what could effectively be compared to a massive SOS sign on a beach. I don't know when I decided I was going to make this video all about aliens, but there's really no going back now. So what are they trying to say to us? What message could be so important that they had to carve it into the side of a planet? Okay, it doesn't make much sense to us. This is clearly communication in a Martian language that we just don't know yet. Number 7. Martian face. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 spacecraft was circling around Mars and taking photos of the surface in an attempt to find a good spot to land for its sister ship, the Viking 2. During its journey, they managed to photograph what appears to be a massive Martian face sticking out of the side of the planet, almost 2 miles long from end to end. It's in a region of the planet that is called Cydonia, and until now I didn't even know that the regions on Mars had names. Scientists released the photo to the public a few days later, claiming that it was just a rock formation, saying, "A huge rock formation which resembles a human head, formed by shadows giving the illusion of eyes, nose, and mouth." But that's just what they want you to think. My degree in alienology tells me that this is actually a Martian equivalent of the Maui statues, clearly a recreation of the aliens that reside on the planet. Number 6. Floating spoon. In 2015, the Mars Curiosity rover picked up another interesting and potentially alien thing amidst the rocks and dust. On August 30th, 2015, on the rover's 1089th day on Mars, it photographed what appears to be a massive floating spoon, a large handle shape extending from the rocks and ending in what appears to resemble a curved end of a spoon. NASA, of course, wants us to think that this spoon formation was caused by the wind breaking away at the rocks and leaving this shape behind. But I am here to tell you that this is actually the remnants of a Martian kitchen. Me and the other people on obscure internet forums are looking forward to the day that we find the fork and knife to complete the full set. And maybe the massive unexplained Mars hole is actually just a big plate. Number 5. Ghost. On this channel, we often look at blurry images that appear to show some kind of ghost or demon lurking in the background. But this one is a bit different than those because this one, of course, comes from Mars, so there's a bit more of a valid excuse for the image to not be of the best quality. This black and white image from the Mars rover appears to show another barren landscape of rocks and dust. Pretty typical for Mars, it honestly seems like kind of a boring place. But near the right corner of the image, you can see what appears to be the figure of a ghostly woman standing on top of one of the large rocks. To me, it looks like she's wearing a dress and, kind of standing with her arm like this or something, and she's got long dark hair. Others online said that the figure reminded them of a weeping angel creature from Doctor Who. No matter what you think, it's pretty creepy to look at and doesn't seem as easily explained away as any of the others. Number 4. Space crab. In 2015, the Mars rover sent back this image of a rocky cliff on the surface of Mars, and like the last, it seems pretty ordinary at a first glance. But when you zoom in to the right side of the image, you can see what appears to be some sort of orange, horrific alien crab spider monster, and it honestly makes my skin itch just looking at it. People online were going crazy and asking NASA to send some sort of mission out to try and figure out what this creature is, because you can tell there's nothing else that even resembles it in the surrounding area or in other photos we've seen of the planet. One scientist brushed it off, saying that they see images like this about once a week. And all I have to say, are there really that many spider space crabs on Mars they see them once a week? Like the last one, NASA doesn't seem to offer up any sort of quick explanation, instead just saying, there's no crab, you're crazy. Well, NASA, you may be correct, but if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Number 3. Dust devils. Alright, let's take a quick break from the crazy and talk about something that has been scientifically explained, but is still just a horrifying concept that I hope I never have to personally experience. This image of a Mars landscape taken in 2016 reveals what appears to be a long vertical column. This is actually known as a Martian dust devil. These occur on Earth as well, but they're usually pretty short-lived and harmless. They're caused when the wind creates what is basically a small little tornado of dirt and sand, but the ones on Mars are a whole lot scarier. They're estimated to be able to grow to the size of about 10 times the size of an average Earth tornado and spin around at about 70 miles per hour, or 112 kilometers per hour for us Canadians. While the winds apparently wouldn't bother you that much, the sand hitting you in the face and tearing apart your spacesuit would be a pretty big issue. Oh, and also you'll probably be struck by a bunch of miniature lightning bolts too. Number 2. Alien fungus. Alright, right back into the crazy. This image was taken by the Mars rover Opportunity in the year 2014, and just like most of the Mars photos we've seen, it's a bunch of rocks and dust. But wait, there's more. People noticed in the bottom left and middle of this image that there appears to be some sort of a more brightly colored object. It's dark red in the middle and white along the outside, which led people to start nicknaming it the Mars Jelly Donut. Theorists took to the internet to share their own opinions about what they believe the suddenly appearing formation to be. It is of course an alien fungus that somehow managed to grow on the surface of Mars. The truth of the situation that NASA shared is that it's apparently two pieces of a rock that the Mars rover drove over top of and managed to split in two. One of the pieces rolling down the hill to where it rests in the bottom left of the image. Number 1. Barack Obama. Ex-United States President Barack Obama is a Martian and actually lives on Mars? Of course. This panoramic image was taken from the summit of a place on Mars called Husband Hill and was snapped back in 2005 by NASA's Spirit rover. The picture was taken over the course of 3 days to provide, quote, a level of clarity that is unequaled in the history of Mars exploration. This high level of clarity allowed us to see the truth of what's hiding on Mars. People pointed out the fact that there was a rock that seemed to be in the exact shape of Barack Obama's head. At first glance, I really didn't see it, but once you look at it for longer, it really becomes uncanny. Obama has previously said in interviews that he would really like to see humans fly out and live on Mars, so here's my theory. He traveled back in time, taking a space rocket with him, went to Mars, became king of Mars where they built a statue of him, and years later NASA took a picture of the eroded statue in 2005, which I believe is definitely the easiest explanation.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Almaz. Almaz was a super secret Soviet military space station program that began in the early 1960s. Basically, there were 3 separate stations that were launched between 1973 and 1976, and they were crewed military recon stations. How they kept the whole thing more under wraps is that they designed them like civilian space stations. One of the stations failed shortly after achieving orbit, but the last 2 both were successful in their crewed testing. Although there was success on these flights, the cost associated with them and the benefits of the program weren't matching up, so in the end it didn't go further than there, although the technology used in this program has of course gone on to inform others. In our number 9 spot today we have Long March 2F. Last year in 2020, China claimed to have successfully launched and tested a quote reusable spacecraft, which is said to be a space plane that could be the key to frequent and low-cost access to space, which is a crazy thing to say. While this is very exciting and could potentially help space exploration in very valuable ways, it is said that this particular mission still has quite a bit of mystery surrounding it. It is said that while the launch was viewed by people, the exact nature of the craft itself as well as what it did in space isn't quite clear. An unnamed military source that was quoted by the South China Post apparently said that there were many firsts during this launch, which is why everything is so secretive and secure. At the end of the day, all we can do is sit back, watch, and see what happens. Who knew there was so much drama in the space world? Well, I kind of guess everyone did. I mean, take a look at the space race. In our number 8 spot today, we have Corona. Speaking of the space race, if you're unfamiliar, it was the 20th century competition between the Soviet Union and the United States, and it certainly was something that the world had never seen before. Basically, it was each country trying to one-up each other on spaceflight technology and capabilities, and while this competition had its origins in the missile-based nuclear arms race, it also managed to create a lot of technological advancements in the world of space exploration. Doing recon was truly one of the first priorities of both of these countries when it came to actually going to space, and that is why from 1960 to 1972, a recon project with the now terrible nickname Corona was put into effect. Basically, this project was a series of strategic recon satellites that were produced and operated by the CIA Directorate of Science and Technology with additional help from the US Air Force. So basically, the most incredible minds and those with the highest security clearances were in on this top secret mission. These satellites were then used to provide photographic surveillance of both the Soviet Union and China. Basically at the time, everyone was really worried about nuclear power, and this gave them the opportunity to peek behind the curtain and see what was really going on. In our number 7 spot today we have Spaceship One. On July 26, 2007, there was an explosion that occurred at a rocket propulsion test site at the Mojave Air and Spaceport in California. This explosion caused the death of 3 people and 3 others had to be hospitalized for serious injuries. While there were details released about this event, the exact specifics of how this happened were kept shrouded in mystery for quite some time. Basically, the explosion occurred just 3 seconds after the start of a cold flow test of nitrous oxide, or laughing gas. The test was because, during the planned suborbital space trips, the nitrous oxide would then be used as an oxidizer to ignite a fuel of solid rubber, and the test was to check that the fuel system plumbing works, and it wasn't meant to ignite anything. There were about 7 people there for the test, but most of them were behind a barrier that is used when testing things like rockets. Because of the nature of the test, there would seemingly be no reason for it to explode, but it obviously still did, and the reason as to how and why was kept a secret from the public. In our number 6 spot today we have Xizhang-21. Not too long ago, China launched a satellite called Xizhang-21 designed to test new ways to clean up space debris, which is super cool and actually really important. This is all fine and well, but here's where the mysterious part comes in. Basically, something else has joined in orbit with the satellite, and the US Space Force detected and cataloged it, and while they thought they knew what it was, it turns out that they don't because it's not acting as expected. They thought it was a type of rocket body, but now they're just left with more questions than answers. Now there are doubts about whether it even is this rocket body or if it is an entirely different object, and regardless, what is the plan with it? This is all a precarious situation as many world powers are testing out certain anti-satellite technologies, which of course would be problematic for all the other countries. There's a good chance that we will likely never know the entire truth about the purpose of what the object trailing Xizhang-21 is, but it's for sure keeping the Air Force on the lookout, and the rest of us can just sit and speculate and hope it's nothing bad for us. In our number 5 spot today we have the fallen astronaut. This isn't exactly a space mission, but it is something that happened in space and not a lot of people know about it, and it certainly was not something NASA knew about before it took place. The fallen astronaut is an aluminum sculpture that was meant to depict an astronaut in a spacesuit. The piece was commissioned and placed on the moon by the crew of the Apollo 15 on August 1st, 1971. It is next to a plaque that lists the 14 names of the men who died, and the entire thing is meant to be a tribute and to commemorate the astronauts and cosmonauts who have died in the advancement of space exploration. This wasn't cleared prior to being done, but I think the important thing is that it was done. The sacrifice of those people cannot be overstated, and it was for the benefit of us all. Those people were brave and brilliant, and they deserve to be commemorated in the best way possible, on the moon itself. In our number 4 spot today we have X-37B. In 2009 at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, they received a mysterious visitor at the Air Force's super secret X-37B spaceplane returned from orbit. This spaceplane went on a record-breaking mission as the unmanned spacecraft was in orbit for the last 780 days before autonomously returning to Earth. While we obviously know about the return of this craft, we will likely never know about exactly what went on. The most information we have is that the Air Force Research Laboratory used the spaceplane as an orbital platform to conduct highly classified experiments. That is both super cool and super terrifying. Apparently the spaceplane deployed a few small satellites, and the experiments were meant to test different technologies from avionics to advanced propulsion systems. The return of this spaceplane actually marked the 5th successful mission for the plane, which is super impressive. While being very secretive, this plane captured the attention of many amateur spy satellite hunters, but it proved to be difficult to keep tabs on because the spaceplane had the ability to alter its orbit in space. That means it requires a lot of vigilance to keep track of, exactly like a super secret plane should. In our number 3 spot today we have Artemis 1. This one is less of a top secret mission and more so on the side of being one you maybe haven't heard of because it hasn't quite happened yet. Artemis 1 is a planned uncrewed test flight that's a part of NASA's Artemis program. The Artemis program is a United States-led international human spaceflight program. Basically the goal is to return humans to the moon, most specifically the South Pole area of the moon. The aim is to have humans there by 2025, and if successful, this would be the first crewed lunar landing mission since Apollo 17 that took place in 1972. That's wild! There's people in space right now, and we haven't taken a trip back to the moon since 1972? I'm just glad we're working on heading there. Artemis 1 is expected to launch no earlier than February of 22, but it is likely to get pushed back until the summer. And while we wait with bated breath, making sure everything is fully prepared for the mission is more important than rushing. This mission will be the first flight of the Orion MPCV, and it will be the certification for the Orion spacecraft as well as the Space Launch System launch vehicle to see if they are ready for crewed flights. If all goes well, crewed flights will begin with the second flight test, Artemis 2. In our number 2 spot today we have an entanglement. Not too long ago, actually just over a week ago as of filming this video, Russia successfully launched a classified military satellite that is said to be a part of Moscow's early warning anti-missile system. Just shortly after this, like we're talking just hours after this, China also had a space launch. They launched their Xi'an-11 satellite into space, which is thought to be in a testing or trial phase right now, with its eventual mission being kept a secret. While all of this this is of course fine and well, the one concerning thing is that people are starting to speculate that perhaps these missions might be linked and that there is a possibility that Russia and China are working together out in space. Who knows really, and there's a high chance that this is just a space coincidence, and I'm not trying to start a space gossip column. Either way, whatever this test satellite is that China launched, we don't know what it will one day be used for, but we can all wait together because whatever it is, it's likely to be probably exciting. In our number 1 spot today we have the Manned Orbiting Laboratory. Okay, so you remember the Soviet Union's secret Almaz mission we talked about at the beginning of this video in number 10? Well, here's another mission that was like in response to that. Basically, this program called the Manned Orbiting Laboratory was run by the Air Force and the intelligence community's National Reconnaissance Office, and the goal of it was to spy on and throw the Soviet Union off track. Some of the documents in this mission have now been declassified, and according to them, one of the goals was to knock some of Moscow's satellites out of orbit or to fire projectiles at them. They even wanted to try and capture one of the Soviet satellites in space and then basically send it back down to Earth so that they could study it. That's wild! And here's the thing that I couldn't tell you before about the Almaz that I can tell you now. Moscow equipped their secret space station with a rapid-fire cannon in order to stop any of this from happening. I seriously feel like I'm watching some sort of space action movie. I can't believe these are real things that happened and were created in the 60s and 70s of all the times. Number 10. Extended space travel can change your DNA. Astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent a year at the International Space Station in 2016, returned to find out that he was 2 inches taller than his departing height. The new physical differences between Kelly and his identical brother, Mike, also an astronaut, were startling. Scientists compared the DNA of the two and found that besides growing 2 inches, Kelly's gut bacteria was completely different and his gene expression had changed. Scientists concluded that the changes were caused by the stresses of space travel, which can cause changes in a cell's biological pathways. Now, although Kelly eventually returned to his original height, his other genetic changes were seemingly irreversible, meaning Kelly and his brother are no longer identical twins, which is insane. Number 9. Time on Earth moves faster than time in space. Yes, this isn't just something that was made up for the film Interstellar, it's a real thing. Time moves differently in space. Due to time dilation, a perceptive theory of relativity referencing a difference in the elapsed time measured by 2 observers, astronauts stationed in outer space lose approximately 1 second per week. The spin of Earth, its orbit around the Sun, and the solar system's motion around the Milky Way all combine to decrease the time we experience on Earth. Though minuscule, the second per week dilation results in nearly a minute lost annually and more than 8.5 minutes lost each decade. Number 8. An astronaut was covered in toxic ammonia during a spacewalk. Bob Kirby was no stranger to spacewalking when he was installing upgrades to the International Space Station. But while out there, a cooling line broke and spewed toxic ammonia all over his suit. Now, for those of you who don't know, a spacecraft is a closed system, meaning that the only air that you have to work with is the air you brought up with you. Now, first Bob had to stop the leak, then he had to figure out how he was going to get back in the space shuttle without bringing the volatile ammonia contaminating his spacesuit. But some good old-fashioned science helped with that one. Ammonia has a low boiling point, so he just needed to vaporize it off his suit. To do this, he simply baked himself in sunlight for an extra 30 minutes, arguably one of the most surreal and terrifying sunbathing methods a human can experience. Later, a fellow astronaut brushed off the suit and equipment. To be extra cautious, they partially vented the shuttle airlock, and next, to be even more careful, the shuttle crew all wore oxygen masks inside until they were positive nothing had made its way in. Nothing did make its way in, thankfully, but that sounds like a terrifying experience. Number 7. Magnetic explosions. Every day, the space around Earth booms with giant explosions. Yup, explosions. When the solar wind, the stream of charged particles from the sun, pushes against the magnetic environment that surrounds and protects Earth, it tangles the sun and Earth's magnetic fields. Eventually, the magnetic field lines snap and realign, shooting away nearby charged particles. This explosive event is known as a magnetic reconnection. While we can't see magnetic reconnection with our bare eyes, we can see its effects. Occasionally, some of the perturbed particles pour into Earth's upper atmosphere where they spark the auras. Magnetic reconnection happens all across the universe wherever there are twisted existing magnetic fields. NASA missions like the magnetospheric multiscale mission measure reconnection events around Earth, which helps scientists understand reconnection where it's harder to study, like in flares on the sun, in areas surrounding black holes, and around other stars. I just don't like the idea of things constantly exploding around us, and we can't do anything about it. Number 6. A jammed solar panel threatened the safety of the entire ISS. Astronaut Scott Parzynski had to install a new module on the ISS that would serve as a node for the addition of future research laboratories. Part of the mission required changing the location of an array of solar panels. Things are going along really well until the crew inside commanded these larger solar panels to extend, he said. They got jammed up and the panels began to tear. It was unsafe to continue to extend this panel any further, you couldn't retract it either, Scott said. There was concern that if we even tried to undock the space shuttle, it might rip apart and hit the shuttle. After 72 hours of grueling work on the ground, NASA came up with a plan. Scott would have to travel further away from the safety of an airlock than had ever been previously attempted. It wasn't only the distance that was nerve-wracking, as Scott explained, there was a real danger that we could do even worse damage to the space station. Then there was a partial risk to myself, because if there was any metal-to-metal connection with the solar panel or arcing, it could actually electrocute me or cause ignition of the 100% oxygen in my spacesuit. All the tools I was working with had to be specially insulated. The metal parts of my spacesuit had to be wrapped in special tape, he said. Thankfully, everything worked out and the mission was a success, and Scott has said, "I still to this day think it's one of NASA's greatest accomplishments." Number 5. Astronauts must drink recycled sweat and urine. This isn't as scary as it's just gross. Water is a limited resource in space, and because of this, astronauts must resort to recycling their own waste. It only takes about 8 days for the systems on the space station to process water. NASA astronaut Scott Kelly consumed approximately 730 liters of recycled urine and sweat during his year-long mission. It tastes like bottled water, says Lane Carter, the water subsystem manager for the ISS at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. I don't really trust him though. He continued, "As long as you can psychologically get past the point that it's recycled urine and condensate that comes out of the air." Now, condensate is the collected breath and sweat of the crew, shower runoff, and urine from animals on board the station. 93% of all water on board is reclaimed, according to a video posted by Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield while he was on the space station in 2013. "We can recycle about 6,000 extra liters of water for the station every year," he said. I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do, but I don't think I could do that. Number 4. There are floating animal corpses in space. Okay, well this sounds strange right away, but this makes sense considering the first test subjects to make it to space were animals. Before space programs started sending people up into orbit, scientists couldn't agree on what it would be like for a living organism to leave Earth's atmosphere. What would be the effects of weightlessness on a mammal? How would the body handle radiation from the sun? So instead of sending people up in such a risky situation, the United States and Russia sent monkeys, chimps, dogs, and other animals into space in order to analyze such effects. And when a seemingly good thing turned into a failure, these animal corpses were launched into space, where they reportedly float to this day and can be seen by astronauts making trips to space. While this is sad, this scene can seem a bit creepy too. Just imagine animal corpses floating around against the backdrop of a black and infinite space, and you have to just go on doing what you came to do. I also feel like this would make me feel sad if I was an astronaut and was missing my pet and saw that. Number 3. Space music. Sound needs a medium to travel, and thus it cannot be heard in the vacuum of space. Yet, astronauts have returned to Earth with fascinating tales of hearing odd noises while in space, which is terrifying. During the Apollo 10 mission, which was a test run for sending the first men to the moon, astronauts were carrying various equipment with them which was being tested to withstand space as they were deemed essential for the moon landing. While circling the moon, the astronauts on the vessel heard a certain whistling sort of music. The music lasted for almost an hour and creeped the living daylights out of the astronauts. One of them described the sound as a sort of otherworldly music. On returning to Earth, the astronauts struggled for a while on whether or not to tell NASA and the rest of the world about what they experienced. Later, astronaut Michael Collins, who was also part of the Apollo 11 mission with Aldrin and Armstrong, revealed hearing similar music while on the moon's surface. An engineer from US Space Agency said the noises likely came from interference caused by radios within the lunar and the command modules. However, Al Worden, an astronaut on Apollo 15, disputed the explanation. Number 2. Space Snake. Retired NASA astronaut Dr. Story Musgrave has accomplished a lot in his career as a spaceman. Only the second astronaut to fly on 6 space flights, Dr. Musgrave is also the most formally educated astronaut with 6 academic degrees. He is also the only astronaut to fly aboard all 5 space shuttles. With all this, he seems to be a really credible source, and he has claimed that he saw an 8-foot-long white snake floating through space. Now, it's not hard to imagine that this could have been a hose detached from the spacecraft, but Dr. Musgrave remains adamant. He claims that he observed the 6 to 8 foot long eel or serpent-like creature on not 1 but 2 of his space flights. During multiple interviews, Dr. Musgrave has insisted that alien life is out there and that he has observed it, which is just scary. And coming in at number 1, they're on the moon watching us. When astronaut Neil Armstrong took a walk on the moon and became the first man to do so in 1969, many conspiracy theories came to light. For one, people claimed he didn't actually go to the moon and that the footage was recorded in a studio. Of the many conspiracy theories surrounding this moment, there's one that remains a mystery to date. During the Apollo 11 mission, after Neil landed on the moon, NASA claims to have lost transmission for roughly 2 minutes. And in a reportedly secret message to NASA, Neil said, "These babies were huge, sir. Enormous. Oh my god, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecrafts out here lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon, watching us." Now that sounds absolutely terrifying, and whether this is true or not, the fact that NASA lost transmission with Neil for 2 minutes is scary within itself. Being out in space on a different planet and being completely alone is terrifying.
Number 10. The Venus Wave. Spotted by the Akatsuki spacecraft in 2015, a massive wave was observed traveling across the surface of Venus. Stretching for 10,000 kilometers, the wave continued up until Venus's cloud tops, where it suddenly became stationary. It is good to note that the average traveling speed of clouds in Venus' upper atmosphere roughly caps out at about 100 meters per second. The source of the wave is undetermined, with theories being tossed around that it might have been caused by a rogue gravity wave, which itself would have been caused by the displacement of a fluid from its preferred position. As Venus is an extremely volatile planet, and no research craft has survived for longer than a couple of minutes on its surface, these claims are difficult to prove, and the secrets of this blue dot remain hidden beneath its swirling clouds. Number 9. Oumuamua. On October 19th, 2017, an object was sighted from the University of Hawaii. Classified as a comet, the object is thin and flat, or roughly 1/4 mile long. But more importantly, it was picking up speed. If you don't remember middle school science, an object in motion remains in motion unless acted upon by an object of similar or equal mass. In space, because there is nothing to act upon the object to slow it down, any velocity will be kept until impact. But an increase in velocity doesn't make sense without propellant. So what was moving Oumuamua? Well, the theory goes that it might contain a chunk of solid hydrogen, which was slowly falling off of the object's surface and allowing for an increase in speed. However, studying the comet is completely impossible, as it's the first observed object to fly into our system and then fly back out. So this theory is just kind of unconfirmed, and we may never know where the traveler came from, nor where it did go. Number 8. PSO J318.5-22. Discovered yet again by our friends at the University of Hawaii, PSO J318.5-22 is a rogue planet, floating through space without a star for it to orbit. It's estimated to be roughly the size of Jupiter, but as to where it came from, no one has a clue. Theories about some hoping that it may have been kicked away from its home star due to a gravitational anomaly, but who can say? None but the rogue planet know. Number 7. The Diamond Planet. Discovered in 2004, Janssen is an exoplanet close to the star Cancri A. Years later, the planet was determined to be a carbon planet, a theoretical type of planet with more carbon than oxygen. As a result of this, it is theorized, due to the method of which diamonds are created, that within Janssen could lie an absolute abundance of diamonds. However, getting to it would be difficult. See, Janssen's proximity to the sun sun is so small that average temperatures are estimated to be around 17,000 degrees Celsius. So good luck getting close enough to snag some stones. Honestly, the scariest thing to me is that someone might actually try this, for reasons that I doubt even the greatest minds could truly comprehend, beyond, I guess, greed. Number 6. The Vampire Star. Halloween's over, but the true horror fans know that it lasts all year long. Not just limited to our solar system, the existence of Hammer horror classic monsters has clearly reached the stars, specifically symbiotic stars. See, when two stars are formed in proximity to one another, their mass will draw in the hydrogen from the other star, which will deplete its life, turning it into a white dwarf. From there, the white dwarf will go supernova, annihilating both in the process. What scientists have difficulty explaining is how such celestial entities exist, and worst of all, how some have survived the supernova. It's hypothesized that Betelgeuse, the star, not the ghost, is what's called a cannibal star, and before we observed it, Betelgeuse must have sucked the life out of another star. So why can we still see Betelgeuse today, despite the fact that the other star would have gone nova? Wait, did I say it 3 times? Number 5. The huge LQG. Quasars are extremely supermassive black holes that are surrounded by accretion disks, which then release their generation of a beam as pure radiation. We'll get into that later. Cool. And slightly terrifying, right? Well, the huge LQG is made up of a cluster of 74 quasars. 74. Originally believed to be impossible, this massive cluster of black holes and radiation defies both science and sense just by its existence. The huge LQG has a rough span of 4 billion light years, easily the largest structure in the universe, and by far larger than our own. Number 4. The Boots Void. Do you know what's more terrifying than something? Nothing. And the Boots Void is just that. Nothing. A region of space where there is simply nothing. And to be clear, this isn't Barnard 68, the dark nebula that eats light. No. This is just nothing. Several galaxies do surround it, but none exist within its center. There's nothing within the void. There may never have been, and there maybe never will be. Or maybe there's just something keeping everything else out. Number 3. The incoming megacomet. Did you know that every year 17,000 meteorites fall to Earth? Now, most of these just burn up in the atmosphere, usually long before they're visible. The ones that can be seen are the ones that are actually dubbed meteors. But what if a meteor couldn't burn up in the atmosphere? Spotted by the Hubble telescope, the comet Bernard-Donnelly-Bernstein is currently flying right towards us at around 72,000 miles per hour. 60 miles across, the meteor is roughly half the theorized size of the asteroid responsible for ending the age of the dinosaurs. But nevertheless, this cosmic catastrophe could cause considerable consternation were it to collide with our rock. So, when does it get here? Well, don't bother looking up because it isn't gonna come within like 1 billion miles of us. Even so, if it changes course, even slightly, we could be looking at a pretty dark future. Number 2. Gamma ray bursts. There's a distinct beauty to black holes, their swirling light collapsing into a mass so dense as to erase light itself. Their byproducts are gamma ray bursts, these streams of light that fire out of what would be visualized as the top and bottom of the black hole. It sort of looks like a gyroscope, only one that, defies physics and erases matter. Well, as it turns out, even the most beautiful parts of this flower can be its deadliest, as gamma ray bursts are explosions of high-intensity radiation that could cook anything in its way in a matter of seconds. So it's a good thing that, stars aren't dying out regularly, and even better that our planet has never been hit by a gamma ray burst before. Oh wait, it actually totally was. Well, the effects wouldn't exactly be, Death Star adjacent. If close enough, the radiation would absolutely be lethal, and close in terms of spatial proximity could be anywhere, honestly. Comforting thought. Number 1. The CMB cold spot. The CMB cold spot was discovered by the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe, a device primarily constructed to measure cosmic background radiation and test the theory of the Big Bang. The cold spot was added to a structure that is titled, I'm not joking, the Axis of Evil, a name given to any anomaly that deviates from the Copernican principle. Far larger than the Boots Void, temperatures within the cold spot are around 0.00007 Kelvin. The average in space, of course, is about 2.7 Kelvin. What caused the creation of the cold spot is unknown, but physicist Laura Mersini Houghton claimed that it could be an imprint from a parallel universe.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have PSR B0943+10. Pulsars are rotating neutron stars emitting regular pulses of radiation, and they have long captivated astronomers with their very precise cosmic metronomes. But in 2011, a particularly eccentric pulsar, the one I just named, challenged established understanding and left scientists scratching their heads. Located approximately 3,000 light years away, this is no ordinary pulsar. Instead of maintaining a steady, predictable pattern of radiation, it displays a very perplexing behavior. Without warning, it spontaneously switches between emitting radio waves and X-ray emissions. This erratic mood swing bewilders scientists. Standard models of pulsar behavior were based on the idea that radio wave and X-ray emissions were tied to different periods in a pulsar's life, not that a pulsar could switch between them at will. PSR B0943+10's unpredictable switches happening over mere seconds shatters this belief. Despite being discovered in the 60s, it wasn't until 2011 that this pulsar's unusual trait was detected, demonstrating that even familiar celestial bodies can surprise us. This pulsar's peculiar behavior provides a very unique window into neutron star physics, challenging our knowledge and understanding of these celestial lighthouses. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Galactic Center radio signal. In 2013, astronomers turned their attention closer to home, or more accurately our galactic home, the Milky Way. Detected by the New Star Space Telescope, an unexplained signal emanated from the center of our galaxy, a region dominated by the gravitational behemoth, the supermassive black hole Sagittarius A. This unusual signal, detected in the radio wave spectrum, posed several intriguing questions. Was it perhaps a signal from a previously undiscovered celestial body, or some unforeseen interaction of known cosmic objects? Or could it be an indication of dark matter, the elusive substance that makes up about 85% of the universe's mass? While the nature and source of this galactic center radio signal remain undetermined, it underscores the cosmic riddles that surround us, even in our own galactic backyard. Whether we're probing the distant reaches of our universe or exploring our own galaxy's heart, these celestial signals remind us that our universe continues to be a grand puzzle, offering more questions than answers. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Orphan Afterglow. In the cosmic theater, the year 2019 marked a peculiar detection that challenged the norm. Astronomers using the Chandra X-ray Observatory observed a unique phenomenon, an X-ray burst that was strikingly alone, without its usual precursor, a gamma-ray burst. The cosmic enigma was dubbed an Orphan Afterglow. Typically, gamma-ray bursts, the most energetic explosions in the universe, precede X-ray bursts. These gamma-ray events often indicate the birth of a black hole or a neutron star, and the subsequent X-ray afterglow is the lingering echo of this cataclysmic event. However, the Orphan Afterglow seemed to defy this established pattern. The solitary X-ray burst appeared without a detectable gamma-ray burst, sparking curiosity and speculation among the scientific community. What could have caused such an event? Was it merely that the gamma-ray burst was directed away from Earth, or were there alternative processes at play? In our number 7 spot today, we have the Vela pulsar glitch. In the cosmos, even the most predictable celestial bodies can sometimes throw astronomers a bit of a curveball. This was the case in 2000 with the Vela pulsar, a pulsar that, despite being one of the most observed and best studied, presented an unexpected event that left astronomers scratching their heads. The event, fittingly termed a glitch, saw the pulsar suddenly rotating faster than it usually did. Located about 1,000 light years away in the Vela constellation, the Vela pulsar is a type of neutron star that emits regular beams of electromagnetic radiation out into space. Since its discovery in 1968, it has become one of the most watched celestial objects due to its regularity, allowing scientists to predict its rotations with impressive accuracy. However, in 2000, this predictable rhythm was abruptly disrupted. The Vela pulsar experienced an unexpected acceleration in its rotation. While this pulsar is known to quote-unquote glitch every 3 years or so, the 2000 event was noteworthy due to its scale. The sudden spin-up was larger and more dramatic than anything observed previously, leading to much speculation and study. This intriguing event challenged existing theories about pulsar glitches and their internal structure. Despite decades of observation, the Vela pulsar reminded us us that the universe still has countless mysteries to be unraveled. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Green Bank Telescope FRB. In 2012, the vast expanse of our cosmos spoke once again, this time with a signal captured by the Green Bank Telescope, located in West Virginia in the United States. The signal wasn't a gentle whisper, but a bold, intense burst of radio waves, a fast radio burst, or an FRB. FRBs are brief yet powerful blasts of radio waves that come from distant parts of the cosmos, lasting only a few milliseconds. The source of the Green Bank Telescope FRB, much like other FRBs, remains an enigma. These fast radio bursts, due to their brevity and unpredictable nature, have been notoriously difficult to trace back to their origin, and this one was no exception. Since their first detection in 2007, FRBs have posed a significant challenge to astronomers. What cosmic phenomena could generate such powerful yet fleeting signals? Theories range from highly magnetized neutron stars to extragalactic civilization. The Green Bank Telescope FRB added another layer to this cosmic mystery, an enigma still being explored and deciphered by scientists across the globe. In our number 5 spot today, we have Tabby's star. This star, which has also been referenced as the WTF star, is an F-type main sequence star which is located in the constellation Cygnus, about 1,470 light-years away from Earth. This star is of particular importance because of the fact that it shows unusual light shifts, which includes a 22% dimming in brightness. Basically, from our point of view, something continually blocks the star, and it likely isn't a planet, because a Jupiter-sized planet would only block about 1% of a star the size of this one. So what could it possibly be? There are a few theories out there surrounding this anomaly, but none are able to fully explain what is happening here. Some believe that it is some sort of uneven ring of dust orbiting the star, and others believe that the star's luminosity fluctuates depending on the efficiency of the heat being transported to its photosphere. These are just two of the theories surrounding this star, but there are many more out there, and at this point, we just don't know. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Black Widow Pulsar. Unveiling the drama of the cosmos, our universe revealed an intense astronomical spectacle in 1988. Astronomers detected a fascinating object, a pulsar known as the Black Widow Pulsar, or PSR B1957+20. Pulsars are neutron stars, remnants of supernova explosions characterized by emitting regular beams of radiation as they spin. However, the Black Widow Pulsar stands out from its kin due to a unique and somewhat macabre characteristic. Located approximately 6,500 light-years away from Earth in the constellation of Sagittarius, this pulsar is locked in a destructive cosmic dance with its companion star. As they revolve around each other, the pulsar's intense gravitational pull and radiation are steadily vaporizing its unfortunate partner. The process resembles a venomous black widow spider consuming its mate, hence the name. The pulsar's companion, initially comparable in mass to our sun, is now merely a tenth of that, stripped away by the relentless energy of the Black Widow. The radiation emitted from this process is intense and rhythmic, like a cosmic lighthouse, casting regular signals into the depths of space. Despite the seemingly predatory nature of the Black Widow pulsar, it provides astronomers with an exceptional opportunity to study the effects of extreme gravity and radiation on stellar bodies. This astronomical phenomenon encapsulates the sheer power, violence, and strange beauty of the universe, reminding us of the dynamic and often brutal processes at play in the cosmos. In our number 3 spot today, we have Hoag's Object. Okay, so there are different shapes to galaxies. That's not the weirdest thing in the world. You know that we live in a spiral-shaped one. It's beautiful. There are other galaxies called ellipticals that are more like oval shapes, but one galaxy in particular, which is now called Hoag's Object, is truly like none we've ever seen. Just realizing, how do we get a name like the Milky Way and then they get a name like Hoag's Object? Just would be a horrible name for a galaxy. This galaxy has a yellow core, and this core is surrounded by an outer ring of blue stars that are much younger than the core, but in the middle between the two, there's just nothing, and researchers are completely stumped as to how it could have formed. The galaxy was first discovered in the 1950s, and since then, there is one leading theory as to how it could have been formed, but it still isn't concrete. Basically, the leading theory suggests that perhaps a small galaxy sped through a larger disc-shaped galaxy galaxy, which then created this bizarre situation. But the problem with this theory is that there are no signs of any nearby galaxies that could have served as the sort of bullet in this scenario. If that happened, it also would have sped up the core of Hoag's object, but we can observe it as moving quite slowly, so that also rules out this theory. There have been other galaxies discovered that have some similar characteristics to this one, but none share all the qualities seen in this very bizarre galaxy. In our number 2 spot today, we have the mysterious gap. A new analysis by scientists at MIT of ancient meteorites found something new and very interesting. In the early solar system, there was what is referred to as a protoplanetary disk of dust and gas that rotated around the sun, and eventually it coalesced into the planets that we all know and love today. So this new study and analysis suggests that a sort of mysterious gap existed within this disk somewhere around 4.567 billion years ago, and it was in an area near where the asteroid belt is today. The reason this gap is mysterious is because it isn't quite clear what the cause of this gap was. There are a few possibilities, including Jupiter, during the time when it began to take its shape. Because of its extremely large gravitational pull, it could have pushed gas and dust towards the outskirts, which then would leave a gap in the developing disk. There are other possibilities, but regardless of whatever caused this gap, it is said to have likely served as a cosmic boundary that kept material on either side from interacting with each other. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have shooting stars. Okay, so we often look to the night sky in an attempt to see a shooting star, and the chances might be pretty good depending on how light polluted the area is. I mean, either that or you're seeing one of the Starlink satellites, but either way, we know that shooting stars aren't really stars at all and are instead meteors burning up as they quickly move through Earth's atmosphere. But what if I told you that there really are some shooting stars that are actually stars? Hypervelocity stars were discovered by astronomers in 2005, and it is thought that they occur or form when a binary star system, or a star system that has 2 stars, gets destroyed by a black hole. One of the stars in the system will usually fall into the black hole, which may just send the other one flying across space as fast as millions of miles per hour. It's definitely not the same thing that we think of when we think of shooting stars, but it definitely is quite the galactic event.